5 games, 7 days, 14 world records, and 1 MVP award. After an 8-month injury layoff, Caitlin Clark just accomplished that at the FIA World Cup qualification tournament in Puerto Rico. The Defensive Player of the Year and current WNBA MVP, A'ja Wilson, who was not even invited to Team USA's training camp, had an absolutely astounding reaction while seeing all of this. Thus, Wilson was rewriting Puerto Rico's record books as Clark was observing from the outside and having a very public outburst. And Wilson's situation is going to get much worse. To what extent is A'ja Wilson envious of Caitlin Clark? Tell me in the comments. A player suffers more than just physical harm after 8 months off the floor. Your trust in those split-second decisions just disappears. Your timing deteriorates. And your ability to read defenses slows down. The majority of players returning be cautious while dealing with that type of layoff. They try not to push anything, ease in, and accept their touches. That's the clever move. Almost every player in the sport's history has done that. In under 19 minutes, Caitlin Clark set 5 world records. First, let's discuss the setup. The FIA World Cup qualification tournament in Puerto Rico was neither a friendly nor a preseason scrimmage, but rather an international competition. These were actual matches with actual stakes between actual national teams. Clark hadn't played competitive basketball in 8 months, and she hadn't even started yet. She started the first game against Senegal off the bench, according to coach Kara Lawson. On paper, that sounds like a low-pressure, short landing with plenty of time to shake off the rust. It was intended to proceed that way. The opening unit was being seriously challenged by Senegal's full-court blitz press. Issues. The burden was too much for them to bear. The squad was playing tight, the offensive was stalling, and turnovers were mounting. Clark then made his check-in. Before it could even set, she began reading that press defense right away. She threw throws that made defenders make choices they had to make and pushed transition opportunities before the defense had a chance to recover. We're unprepared for. Against the same defense, the initial unit was in survival mode. Clark was becoming a factory that produced rapid breaks. She scored 17 points, dished out 12 assists, and committed no turnovers in 19 minutes. Nothing. After 8 months of rehabilitation, I came off the bench. Take a moment to consider that. These 12 assists didn't only appear favorable on a box score, at the same time, they broke several FIA all-time records. In her senior national team debut for Team USA, she shattered the record for the most assists ever. The all-time record in USA basketball history, regardless of gender, not just the women's record. Subsequently, she smashed every FIA record for the most assists in a senior national team debut. Every nation, every player in history. She then broke the FIA mark for the most assists by any bench player in the history of international basketball, regardless of gender. One night, 19 minutes off the bench, 3 assist records were set. Only 3 of the 5 records fall under that category. She was touching areas of FIA history that, until that game, no one had even considered. In Puerto Rico, the crowd was reacting in the same manner that audiences do when they view something for which they do not yet have a frame. They would lose it after a pass and a half second of silence because her actions did not appear to be a return. She didn't appear to be getting her bearings. It seems as though the person had been waiting 8 months to accomplish just this. The gates were now open. 14 world records, 5 games, 7 days, and 1 MVP award going to the youngest winner in the history of the competition. It wasn't just this qualifying tournament that Clark excelled in. Over the course of 5 consecutive games, she methodically destroyed the record book, increasing the sum practically every night. Records for assists, debuts, bench players, and per-game efficiency that had never been reached before. By the end of the Spain match, USA Basketball had 14 different FIA records with Clark's name on them. Beside each of them, after 8 months of rehabilitation, she completed all of that while competing internationally on a condensed 7-day program. The addition of the MVP award was not a favor. She was the obvious pick and the youngest player to ever earn MVP of this competition. That's the image then. 5 victories, 1 trophy, 14 records, and the youngest MVP in history. Let's now discuss who wasn't present. This tournament did not feature Jo Wilson, a 3-time WNBA MVP, Olympic gold medalist, and one of the most accomplished active players in the sport today. She wasn't dealing with a scheduling conflict or sitting at home with a wrapped ankle. She did not receive an invitation to the training camp for Team USA. That's it. Wilson's name was not on the list when USA Basketball reviewed the roster and made their choices. Moreover, no, before anyone suggests that the entire team was absent. Breanna Stewart received an invitation. Nafisa Collier received an invitation. They both won gold medals at the Olympics. They both play in the WNBA, and both were forced to decline it due to commitments related to the WNBA collective bargaining agreement discussions. They had a good reason. Wilson had absolutely no public justification. The basketball community quickly began to ask questions. Was this a change in roster philosophy? Did Wilson and the USA Basketball leadership have a disagreement? Although no one had a definitive response, many were undoubtedly making connections, particularly in light of Wilson's highly visible actions toward Clark throughout the previous 12 months. Wilson then parted her lips. Following Clark's formal coronation as FEA, Wilson stated that Clark was fortunate that I wasn't present when MVP and all 14 records were verified. Take your time reading that back. 14 world records are broken by Clark, becomes the youngest MVP winner ever, goes from 5 to 0, does it after sitting out for 8 months? Wilson believes that Clark was fortunate not to be in the building. But here's the deal. Wilson was allowed to participate in the competition. She was excluded from the pre-tournament training camp. Before a single game was played, USA Basketball made that decision. It was never about Clark being fortunate then. This had to do with Wilson's initial lack of selection. Additionally, the framing of "lucky I wasn't there" only works if you think Wilson would have 14 world records and the youngest MVP award in tournament history were somehow avoided. While someone else is actually altering history, that is a daring assertion to make from your couch. Clark never answered. She didn't need to. The remark that I was fortunate not to be present did not appear out of nowhere. Wilson has been doing this since Clark's rookie campaign, and at Tacosis, the trend is currently rather obvious. Wilson did not simply shrug and move on when Clark signed her Nike contract as a rookie. She questioned Clark's numbers, whether the attention was warranted, and pretty much everything about Clark's influence on the game during a month-long public outburst. Not one interview, not one comment. The news of the shoe deal was accompanied by a persistent public effort that seemed to be planned, and the timing was obvious. Then, Clark was named Athlete of the Year by Time magazine. Wilson also had a comment about that. Wilson also had something to say regarding Clark's ability to secure significant speaking engagements and corporate sponsorship funding at a level that Wilson was not witnessing. Wilson always reacts when Clark is acknowledged for something. Every single time. That's not frustration. There is a pattern there. This is where Wilson becomes quite uncomfortable. So let's discuss what Nike is actually doing at the moment. Nike isn't handling Clark's signature shoe like a typical player release. According to reports, they have reorganized workspaces around this initiative, invested much in the creation of high-end prototypes, and are conducting a comprehensive marketing campaign with designers, partnerships, and a significant campaign presence in all of their channels. Instead of just launching a new product, Nike is approaching this shoe drop as a cultural event. Meanwhile, Wilson's shoe is in the bargain bin. Furthermore, that isn't a figure of speech. Cheap stock, no campaign presence, no aggressive marketing, nothing. In essence, Nike has redirected all of the effort and resources that were directed at Wilson's line. Instead, it was aimed straight at Clark. That is a business decision, and companies don't make decisions at random. In only 2 phrases, the sales figures convey the entire tale. When Clark's signature shoe is ultimately released, it is expected to sell out in a matter of minutes. Ian Wilson's shoe hasn't sold out after being on sale for months. The identical statement has 2 data points, and you can quickly determine exactly where each of these athletes is affiliated with the world's largest sports brand. Clark came in at number 4 on Forbes' ranking of the most influential women in sports. She was named Athlete of the Year by Time magazine. Around her, Nike is constructing a project at the corporate level. That is not a coincidence. These are businesses and newspapers that react to actual market data, audience figures, and TV ratings. Additionally, Wilson's shoe campaign is "Fading is not a mystery." Businesses observe behavior. Wilson became known as one of the most toxic figures in the WNBA, ran a public campaign against the biggest attraction in sports for a year, and persisted in his pursuit of Clark. Boardrooms, sponsors, and Nike all took attention whenever Clark received acclaim. Wilson's sneaker is marked down on a sale rack, and Clark is ranked 4th on Forbes' list of the most powerful women in sports. That's not bad luck, nor is it a coincidence. That's the market expressing its opinions on the way these two players have behaved. In the post-game news conference, a reporter approaches Kara Lawson after Clark sets 5 world records off the bench against Sagal and questions her directly about what Clark just did. "Everyone should shine, not just Caitlin," was effectively Lawson's response. She wouldn't even mention Clark's name when discussing a performance that had just changed the course of FIBA's history. Because that didn't sound like a coaching response, that video became viral in a matter of hours. And it sounded like a diversion. Even before the press conference, you could see the tension on the floor during that Puerto Rico game. Clark wasn't off. She did a good job of reading defenses. They had keen intuition. The system's plotting half-court offense, which actively played against everything she does well, was the issue. This democratic method, in which no single player serves as the offense's focal point, was Lawson's entire concept. The load is divided equally among everybody. In a team meeting, that could sound acceptable, but in reality, it meant Clark was working in a system designed for a completely other speed. Moreover, Clark plays a fast-paced game. After that, Nate Tibbetts took over as head coach for the Italy match and made 3 choices right away. Clark was initiated by him, and after placing her in a 3-guard lineup with Paige Beckers and Kelsey Plum, he simply let them run. The Italy game was completely different from the previous one. The spacing immediately opened up. The ball was in motion, yet its speed was entirely different, faster, cleaner, and more intentional. Before Italy's defense had a chance to establish itself, Clark was driving the transition. The entire offense had a flow to it that the other games simply lacked, and Beckers and Plum were filling lanes. By 34 points, Team USA prevailed. Tibet thereafter declared in public that the previous strategy had been incorrect. That is almost never said by coaches. Getting up for a news conference after a game conference and stating that the prior strategy was flawed is essentially a public audit of your predecessor's choices made in front of cameras. Every comment made by supporters and commentators since the news conference and defeat was recorded and disseminated on all social media. Thus, Spain and New Zealand received the same template. Clark's 3-guard starting unit moves the ball cleanly and quickly. In the Spain game, Kalia Copper led the scoring with 20 points, while Clark finished with 7 points and 7 assists in 22 minutes. And when a point guard is truly executing the offense well, it is precisely what is meant to occur. The offense can flow via Clark even if she isn't the top scorer. That was demonstrated by the 34-point Italy rout. It was once again demonstrated during the Spain game. Before something that genuinely succeeded took its place, the everyone shines mentality endured exactly one coaching change. Team USA went from tense news conferences to decisive victories with just one lineup change and the choice to start Clark and let her push the pace. Tibbetts gave USA Basketball that framework for 2026, and it's all based on what Clark just demonstrated she is capable of. Puerto Rico just altered the course of 2 things simultaneously: the Indiana Fever for the upcoming season and Team USA for Berlin 2026. Clark demonstrated that it was more than just a hot week over those 5 games. It served as a blueprint. The 3-guard lineup consisting of Clark, Paige Beckers, and Kelsey Plum has become the standard for Team USA's international offensive strategy. This combination resulted in a 34-point victory over Italy and a perfect 5-0 record throughout the competition. Additionally, the coaching team has already indicated that this is the course for Berlin 2026. A lineup that does that is not thrown out. You construct around it. What transpired in Puerto Rico is essentially a sneak peek for Fever fans and everyone watching Lexi Hall, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Sophie Cunningham. In a system designed around her playmaking, Clark is in perfect health, setting the pace and making everyone around her stare at her. The Fever offensive may resemble that. In Indiana, the pieces are already there. Inside, Aaliyah Boston is tidying up. Attacking off the catch is Kelsey Mitchell. Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hall are spread out throughout the floor. All Clark needs is a structure that enables her to carry out her actions in Puerto Rico. Additionally, that the roster quickly becomes quite hazardous. Whether the Fever coaching staff observes what Tibbetts discovered in real time, and applies the same lesson prior to the start of the upcoming season is the question. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Ayucha Wilson stated that although Wilson was not excluded from the competition, Clark was fortunate not to be present. She just didn't receive an invitation to the training camp. That choice was made by USA Basketball before a single game, tipped off. Nevertheless, Clark went out and shattered 14 world records, became the youngest MVP ever, and won 5 straight games without losing. Wilson's shoe has been marked down and unmarked for months on the shelf. Even before it has been released, Clark's iconic shoe is expected to sell out in a matter of minutes. Wilson wasn't present. Without her, Clark broke 14 world records. That is not fortunate. That is simply the difference between these two players' current positions. Do you think Wilson genuinely thinks she would have made a difference in Puerto Rico? Or is the only thing left to say after the record book quit supporting you that she was fortunate not to be present? To what extent is A.J. Wilson envious of Caitlin Clark? Tell me in the comments section below. To ensure you never miss anything, like, subscribe, and enable all notifications. We'll see you in the video when you click on it, the following one.